Welcome to China's Living Legends.
欢迎来到我的频道。
Today we're plunging into a moment in history that really truly reshaped the world. The unification of China under the Qin state in 221 BCE. It's a date that marked the end of, well, centuries of brutal conflict. But here's the mystery. How did one ruler not just conquer this huge landmass, but utterly transform its identity, the very structure, laying foundations that would last for, what, millennia?
Yeah, it's way more than just a military win. We're talking about a complete reimagining of power itself. What's so striking is how the Qin achieved this seemingly effortless dominance, and then immediately implemented changes so radical they touched everything spiritual, administrative, the works. This wasn't just brute force. It was, well, a masterclass in strategic dominance and, crucially, controlling the story, narrative control.
Right. So our mission today is to pull back the curtain on those tactics, the philosophy behind this huge shift. We'll start with this incredible, almost unbelievable story of King Jian of Qi, a powerful ruler who basically walked right into a trap, lured by a promise that led to, well, a shocking betrayal and this quiet, humiliating end. This isn't just conquest. It's like a strategic takedown that really sets the tone for everything else.
Exactly. Then we'll peel back the layers of how Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, literally redefined imperial power. We're talking completely new titles, projecting cosmic authority, a whole philosophical framework to justify his iron rule. And finally, we'll look at the practical things, the administrative solutions he put in place to govern this sprawling new empire, and why those very solutions created their own lasting, maybe unforeseen problems. This is where it gets really interesting, the long-term stuff.
Okay, let's set the scene. The dramatic final act of the Warring States period. King Jian of Qi, picture this, ruler of Qi, formidable kingdom, well-fortified, powerful. And he gets approached by the king of Qi with what sounds like an amazing offer. A huge fiefdom, 500 listi if he just surrenders. And King Jian, full of, well, apparently sincere hope, he accepts. He goes, ready for peace.
Well, what happens? Qin just absorbs Qi, almost without a fight. King Jian, he doesn't get his fiefdom. Oh. Instead, he's packed off to this remote place called Gong, and just left there, left to slowly starve to death among the pines and cypresses. Grim.
Wow.
It's not just military, you see. It's psychological warfare. Yes. Devastatingly precise. It sent a message. Qin weren't just conquerors. They were master manipulators. They could undermine you before you even drew your sword. Imagine the psychological impact on the other states seeing that.
Right. So with this near-bloodless final conquest, Jian now faces an even bigger challenge. How do you pacify everyone? The hearts and minds of this newly unified people, many just conquered. And what's striking looking at the old histories is how clinically, almost like dispassionately, these huge events are recorded. A real contrast between those cold descriptions and the massive propaganda blitz that must have followed.
Which leads to the crucial question, how did Qin justify it all, this aggressive expansion? How did they sell it to the new subjects? Yingzheng, the guy who becomes Qin Shi Huang, he immediately starts crafting this new image for himself. Not a conqueror, oh no, he's an emissary of justice. He paints the old kings of the 6 states as, incompetent, immoral clowns, basically. Their downfall, their own fault. And through this brilliant narrative sleight of hand, a war of aggression gets repackaged as a defensive counterattack. Divinely sanctioned, naturally, and supposedly what the people wanted all along.
And he had this perfectly crafted, very self-serving speech ready to go. Claimed the king of Han broke his oath, so Qin had to act. Zhao violated a treaty, Wei was plotting, Chu invaded Qin land, Yan even sent an assassin, Jing Ke, remember him, to kill Yingzheng, and Qi, the last one, severed ties, prepared for rebellion. So he, with his humble person, was forced, mind you, to raise armies, quell these violent rebellions, hold justice, all with divine protection, of course. It's classic rewriting history, isn't it? Making yourself the hero.
Absolutely. Classic playbook. And in that moment, Qin secured an absolute monopoly on the narrative. The old nobles, the loyalists from the conquered states, doesn't matter how angry they were, they lost their platform. No voice. It's fundamental to consolidating power, control the story, shape the future. It's not just winning the war, it's winning the peace. And that starts with the narrative.
Okay, so the whole world's under his thumb now. Yingzheng faces this unprecedented situation. The old title, king, just isn't enough anymore, is it? He needs something new, something that screams tower like never before. And it wasn't just vanity, right? It was practical. a strategic rebrand.
Precisely. If he stays king, people just see him as another warlord, maybe luckier or tougher than their old rulers, but basically the same. That doesn't build stability. And he couldn't just pick up the old Zhou dynasty title, Son of Heaven, because that title kind of implied you had these semi-independent lords under you, the whole enfofment thing. But he wanted the exact opposite. He planned this centralized commandery county system. So yeah, a new title was absolutely essential for the ideology to even make sense.
And boom, the emperor is born. He believed his virtues surpassed the mythical 3 sovereigns. His accomplishments blew past the 5 emperors, so he mashed their characters together. Huangdi, emperor. This kicks off a whole new imperial brand. Decrees become edicts, commands are proclamations. Even the word for autocracy in Chinese literally means all systems decided by one person. Talk about sending a message.
And what's really insightful is how deep this language overhaul went. Even the emperor's personal pronoun, how he referred to himself, changed to Zen. Before Qin, Zen was common. Anyone could use it. From this point on, emperor only, exclusive use. It's a small thing linguistically, but it's this powerful, constant symbol of his absolute unique authority, power seeping into the very grammar.
He took this control even further, didn't he? With posthumous names. His father got one, Supreme Emperor. But then Ying Zhang just abolished the whole ancient system. His reasoning is fascinating. Posthumous names are judgments. The living judging the dead. Sons critiquing fathers. Ministers debating lords. And that, he said, violated the hierarchy. You don't get to judge your superior even after they're dead.
Yeah, if you connect that to the bigger picture, it's a profound move. Real control freak move, almost. Think about that Confucian story, about the ritual sacrifice of the sheep. Confucius says, you love the sheep, I love the ritual. Meaning, as long as the form, the ritual exists, the memory and the hope of restoring the full meaning and maybe accountability survives. A ruler's posthumous name. It was like that sheep. A formality, sure, but it kept alive this tiny flicker of hope that even the most powerful could eventually be judged by history. The first emperor, he snuffed out that flicker, shut down the whole mechanism of historical critique before it could even start with him.
Wow. Okay, so beyond titles and language, this new dynasty needed a grand, sort of metaphysical framework. Something to make people accept it, give it legitimacy over the old Zhou dynasty. This led to this massive, grand branding project for the new state.
And the philosophy they picked, surprisingly, it came from way over in the eastern state of Qi, Zhu Yan's theory. The cyclical succession of the 5 phases, or 5 virtues, 5 elements. The theory basically said each dynasty rules under a specific element's virtue. The Zhou, they were fire. And since water puts out fire, well, the Qin, who conquered the Zhou, must naturally be the successor dynasty ruling under the virtue of water. Neat, huh? A cosmic justification for conquest.
And this cosmic shift had real-world effects. Changes to the calendar, official colors, even lucky numbers. The Qin calendar started in the 10th month. Robes, banners, all black. And the number 6 became the standard for everything official. It's like a total cosmic makeover.
Right, the framework was super easy to apply. Zhou, fire, so Qin, water. Simple, but why black? Well, one popular story goes back centuries. Duke Wen of Qin supposedly saw a black dragon come out of a river. A clear omen, right? Water virtue. What's fascinating is how they wove these old, deep-rooted omens into this new state ideology, gave it historical weight, spiritual legitimacy, and how does a state act like water? Well, water finds its level, right? So that means fairness, impartiality through strict rule of law, but water is also yin, which is associated with punishment, severity. So a water virtue dynasty wouldn't just rule by law, it would rule by harsh law, unbending law.
And the number 6 popped up everywhere in Qin institutions. Seals, caps, 6 inches, carts, 6 feet wide, a pace, 6 feet, chariots pulled by 6 horses. They even renamed the Yellow River the River of Virtue, tying it all together.
But this raises a really interesting question. How much of this rule of 6 was actually used day to day versus how much was, maybe spun later to fit the theory? Modern archaeology paints a slightly different picture. Lots of Qin standards, like weights and measures, they were decimal-based, 10, not 6. It suggests the rule of 6 wasn't maybe as universal as the histories claim. Probably because, well, it was impractical sometimes. It looks like Qin Shi Huang adopted the 5 phases theory pretty selectively. I mean, think about it. An emperor who wants his dynasty to last 10,000 generations, is he really going to believe his own water virtue is doomed to be overcome by Earth pretty soon? Probably not. It was a useful tool, not necessarily a deeply held belief.
Okay, so the cosmic story helps with legitimacy. But Qin Shi Huang still had this massive practical problem. How do you actually govern this huge new empire day to day? This led to his most lasting policy, maybe the most transformative, the nationwide commandery county system. This thing created the blueprint for imperial Chinese government for like 2,000 years. Basically irreplaceable. People later said, for 100 generations, everyone followed Qin's laws and systems. That's huge.
And this is interesting, this radical system faced real pushback, right from his own top advisor, Prime Minister Wang Wan. Wang Wan suggested what seemed pretty reasonable, traditional even. He said, look, these newly conquered areas are just too far from the capital. You need to appoint new vassal lords, maybe the emperor's own sons, otherwise you can't control them effectively. He was basically arguing for the old Zhou dynasty system, the Enfafet model. Right.
But Li Si, the Commandant of Justice, he strongly disagreed. Vehemently objected. He argued, yeah, maybe the early Zhou kings enfeoffed relatives, but those family ties, they fray fast. He might have said something like, first generation, close family. Second gen, distant cousins. Third, fourth, they're strangers, ready to fight each other. This system, Li Si argued, inevitably leads to civil war, the kind the Zhou rulers could only watch helplessly. He basically blamed the whole warring state's chaos on that decentralized model.
And what's really crucial here is the difference between Zhu's founding and Qin's. Zhu's enfeasement wasn't just giving land away. It was more like granting a franchise for armed colonization. Go out, conquer, expand in our name. Qin's situation, totally different. The emperor had conquered every single inch himself, meticulously, to now just parcel it out, give away pieces of the cake he just baked. That would feel like a raw deal to any ruler, an unacceptable loss of control.
Li Si also hammered home the accountability issue. If a governor screws up or gets rebellious ideas, the central government needs the power to sack him or punish him. Under enfeoffment, a lord's land was his private hereditary property. The central government couldn't easily interfere without starting a war. The recent chaos, Li Si argued, proved that system was fatally flawed.
So when you weigh it all up, practicality, long-term stability, and frankly, the emperor's own clear desire for total centralized power, the commandery system was just the obvious choice. For him, the conditions were right for direct rule now, going back to indirect rule, unthinkable. So Qin Shi Huang settled it himself, declared, the world suffered from endless war because of kings and marquis. The Commandant of Justice is right. That moment really cemented the new imperial path. And it raises that big question for leaders, doesn't it? How do you balance tradition, what everyone's used to, with radical innovation that you know is necessary? And what are the ripple effects, the unintended consequences down the road?
So from that point on, Commanderies replaced enfeoffment. Officially. The empire got divided into 36 Commanderies. And that number, 36.
6 times 6. It's right in with the rule of 6 from the 5 phases theory. Reinforces the whole cosmic order again. Neat packaging.
In each commandery was run by this trio. A civil administrator, a military commandant, and a supervising inspector.
Yeah, clever triumvirate. This division of local power was ingeniously designed. The goal was to make sure no single guy out in the provinces could get powerful enough to challenge the emperor. Brilliant for central control. However, the system created its own issues. These local officials, they served short terms, got rotated around constantly, so they often didn't feel, much connection or long-term responsibility for the place they were governing. They were just stewards, passing through, not owners invested in the land. And this often incentivized, short-term thinking. Get what you can while you're here, rather than investing in sustainable development. And this really represents that eternal tension, doesn't it? The one we still wrestle with. Balancing strong central authority against local energy, local investment, local vitality. It's a debate that just keeps echoing.
So we've taken a deep dive into how Qin Shi Huang didn't just unify China with force. He fundamentally reshaped its identity, its structure, rewriting history, inventing new titles, creating a cosmic justification, a whole new administrative system. The guy's ambition was boundless, a master of the sword, but also, crucially, the narrative.
It really is a powerful lesson in how one determined leader can impose a completely new reality. His reforms were so carefully designed to stop the empire fragmenting like the ones before it. And yet, the very solutions he chose, the harsh water virtue laws, the detached commandery governance, crushing all dissent. You could argue they sowed the seeds for the Qin zone, surprisingly fast collapse just a few years later. It really makes you wonder, can you centralize power so much that it becomes brittle? Too rigid, too fragile to actually last when things get tough.
Yeah. What really stands out to you from this deep dive into the Qin unification? For me, it's how the echoes of that ancient debate, central power versus local control, that balance between strength and stability, they still feel so relevant. They shape our world right now. It makes you think, doesn't it? How much of our own modern systems, our own political debates are built on these very same tensions, these questions that were being fought over literally 2 millennia ago.
where we plunge into the heart of history's most fascinating stories. Today we're journeying back to ancient China, to a figure of almost mythical power, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. He unified a vast, sprawling empire with an iron fist, a formidable army. But, conquest is one thing. Truly uniting people, making them feel part of a single nation. Well, that's an entirely different challenge.
And that's the core mystery we're looking at today, isn't
Yeah.
it? How did he actually solidify his rule beyond just, military might? What were the secret tools, the sort of ingenious strategies he used to bind together such a diverse land? And maybe more importantly, how did he legitimize his power in the eyes of heaven and in the eyes of the people?
Yeah, and the answers might surprise you. We're talking colossal metal giants made from confiscated weapons, all the way to an ancient ritual that, well, he might have just invented himself.
Pretty much. So our mission today is to really delve into these remarkable symbolic gestures, these power plays Qin Shi Huang made.
And maybe even more fascinating, how the meaning behind those symbols changed, sometimes dramatically, over the centuries.
It's a masterclass, really, in how power isn't just exerted, it's perceived.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Qin Shi Huang has just set up his administration, right? 36 commanderies across this new empire. The wars are finally over, but weapons are still everywhere. And then he issues this decree. It's incredible. He decides to literally melt down the tools of war.
It was audacious, absolutely. He ordered the confiscation of all weapons everywhere.
Like all of them, like every spear, every sword.
Every single piece of bronze armament, yeah. And they were just thrown away. No, they were hauled all the way to his capital, Shenyang, melted down, and then cast into these 12 colossal objects he called Zongju Jinren.
Right, the Zongju Jinren. Now, for a long time, historians were a bit puzzled about what these actually were. Some thought it meant like bell stands and separate metal statues. It was confusing. But there was a breakthrough, wasn't there? Something that cleared up centuries of, well, basically a punctuation error.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting, how history gets lost and found. The big clue came in 1978, the excavation of the tomb of Marquis Yi of Zheng. What they found there, well, it changed everything.
What was it?
A complete set of bronze chime bells, absolutely spectacular. But the crucial part, the load-bearing columns, the zongju, they were cast in the shape of human figures, literally these figures holding up the crossbeam for the bells with their hands and heads.
Wow. So Zongju Jinren wasn't two things, it was one single magnificent creation.
Precisely. Human-shaped statues that were also the supports for these enormous bell racks.
And when you say enormous, I mean, the scale sounds unbelievable. Ancient accounts talk about bells so massive the supports alone weighed what? 1,000 shi?
1,000 shi. And he had 12 of them, remember? Placed right there in the imperial palace.
So what's 1,000 shi in, like, today's terms?
Okay, get this.
It
translates to roughly 29 metric tons.
29 tons.
Each. And some records, like the Shuijingzhu, even push that number way up to maybe 58 metric tons per statue.
58? That's staggering.
Whether it's 29 or 58 tons, think about it. That's like 5, maybe 10 adult elephants per statue.
Just the logistics of moving them.
Mind-boggling. Melting all those weapons, casting these giants, moving them. It's immense.
Which brings us back to the big question, why? Why waste all that precious bronze? I mean, bronze was strategic, right? You needed it for weapons, ritual vessels, maybe even coins.
Absolutely vital. So pouring it into purely symbolic statues, it's a statement.
And the number 12, you mentioned that had mystical significance.
Yeah, linked to the great number of heaven. But still, the material cost, astronomical. It tells you something about his priorities.
So what were his intentions? How do we read this?
Well, this really highlights a fundamental choice for any leader, doesn't it? How do you project your power? Peace through strength, or just strength? There are basically two ways to look at it. The first, more positive spin, is he's channeling King Wu of the Zhou dynasty.
King Wu, the one who signaled peace after conquering the Shang.
Exactly. King Wu famously released the war horses, let the oxen graze, symbolic gestures of putting weapons away, signaling peace, time for production.
Right.
So maybe Qin Shi Huang, having ended centuries of war, wanted to send that same message. The fighting's done. Rebellion is difficult now without weapons.
Okay, that's the sort of benevolent emperor interpretation. Peace has arrived. But knowing Qin Shi Huang's reputation, there had to be a harsher take.
Oh, definitely. The cynical view, maybe the more realistic one, some would say, is that he wasn't copying King Wu at all. He was mimicking ruthless figures, like Ji Wuzi of Lu, a warlord who melted down captured enemy weapons to cast a victory bell. Pure bragging.
Like flaunting your kill count.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Or like the Qin general Bai Qi, who made that horrifying monument out of enemy corpses after Qingping. And here's the critical difference. King Wu put away his own weapons. Qin Shi Huang welted weapons taken from the conquered.
Ah, that's a very different vibe.
Completely different. Is it signaling peace, or is it a chilling display of total irreversible domination? I took your swords, and now they're my symbols.
So, which is closer to the truth?
Well, that's really a matter of personal judgment, isn't it? The ambiguity itself is powerful.
And it gets even stranger when you ask what they looked like. Prepare for another twist.
Uh-oh.
There's this legend recorded later about 12 actual giants appearing way out in Lintao. These things were supposedly massive, 35, 40 feet tall, big feet, and crucially, dressed like Yidi barbarians.
Nomadic peoples from frontiers, yeah.
And the legend goes, Qin Shi Huang saw this as an omen, a sign, and cast his 12 metal statues in their image. He supposedly even called them metal barbarians.
Now, the bit about actual giants appearing,
Mm-hmm.
probably a later story layered on, but the idea of sculpting them as barbarians, totally plausible and strategically brilliant.
How so?
Think about the symbolism. It screams, the 4 barbarians submit in tribute. It projects this image that only Qin Shi Huang can control the frontiers, protect the civilized world.
Right, turning potential threats into symbols of his power and legitimacy. Classic move.
It's a masterstroke of propaganda, really.
But here's where the narrative gets flipped again, showing how history gets rewritten. Later interpretations read that omen completely differently.
How?
Some argued the giants weren't a good omen at all. They were a warning from heaven against his tyranny. They said he misread the sign, doubled down on his brutality, and that's why his dynasty collapsed so quickly.
Wow. So the same symbol, completely opposite meanings depending on who's telling the story.
Exactly, and it doesn't stop there. Centuries later, another text, the Song Shu, comes up with another interpretation.
Okay, what now?
Get this. The 12 giants actually foretold the rise of the Han dynasty, which eventually had, guess what? 12 emperors.
Oh, come on. That's just perfect hindsight, isn't it? Reinterpreting the past to fit the present.
It perfectly shows how interpretations could just be freely adapted, manipulated to suit whoever was in power later. The original intent, almost irrelevant.
And the statues themselves. What happened to these metal giants?
That remains one of history's great disappearing acts. A tantalizing mystery.
Okay, so from melting down weapons into these ambiguous metal men, where does the first emperor turn next?
Well, after touring Mount Yi, he does something really surprising, especially for the ruler of the supposedly wolf-like state of Qin. He summons 70 Confucian scholars from Lu, the heartland of Confucianism, a group he wasn't exactly known for cozying up to.
70 of them. That's quite a gathering. An unprecedented gesture. What on earth was he planning?
He was planning to perform the legendary Feng and Shan sacrifices.
Yeah, Feng and Shan. Now, fast forward a few centuries, and these rituals are famous, right? Later emperors kept trying to do them. But back in Qin Shi Huang's time, here's the kicker. Nobody really knew what they were supposed to entail. Not the emperor, not his officials.
Not even the Confucian experts he summoned.
Especially not them, it seems. It was all incredibly vague.
So how obscure are we talking? Were these rituals just lost to time? Or, because you don't find Feng and Shan mentioned on oracle bones or old bronze inscriptions, do you?
And that's the key point. Modern understanding is pretty blunt about this. The rituals were obscure probably because before Qin Shi Huang, they'd likely never actually been performed at all.
Never. So they were just legend.
Pure legend. Kind of a theoretical ultimate ritual dreamed up by Confucian scholars in the East in Qi and Lu. Mount Tai was their sacred local mountain. But the earlier Shang and Zhou capitals were way over in the West. Why would they tie their biggest state sacrifices to some remote mountain in Shandong?
It just didn't make geographical or historical sense for them.
Exactly. It was basically a myth waiting for an emperor ambitious enough and maybe geographically convenient enough to try and make it real.
So, okay, picture the scene. Qin Shi Huang gathers these 70 top ritual experts. He's the unifier of the world. He expects a plan, right? Tell me how to do this ancient sacred rite.
Yeah, you'd think they'd have something prepared.
Instead, they just argue. They couldn't agree on anything.
Utterly unable to agree. They started squabbling over interpretations, proposing wildly different, probably bewildering plans. You can just imagine the emperor's face.
70 scholars bickering about footnotes while the emperor of China taps his foot. Oh, dear.
Well, yeah. And this makes sense in a way. Confucian ritual is famously complex. The more complex any system is, the more you get different schools of thought, factions, arguments about who's got the real orthodox version.
They were lost in their own academic weeds.
Completely. They couldn't give this very pragmatic emperor the clear, straightforward procedure he wanted.
He probably didn't even care that much about the tiny details, did he? What were his real motives here?
Likely twofold. One, declare his absolute sovereignty over these newly conquered eastern lands, right on their sacred mountain. Two, maybe signal some goodwill. Show this Western barbarian conqueror, as some saw him, actually respected their traditions.
And summoning them, giving them the title erudite, like imperial advisors. That was a remarkable gesture from him, considering his usual stance.
It really was.
Yeah.
And you wonder, if those scholars had been a bit more politically astute, maybe less caught up in their debates.
History could have been different.
Maybe. But instead, they're squabbling threw a bucket of cold water on his whole outreach effort. He dismissed their ideas as basically useless ivory tower stuff.
And that was the moment.
That seems to be the moment. The seeds of his really negative view of Confucian scholars were sown. A critical turning point, possibly leading to later persecution.
So he sends the scholars packing. The ceremony goes ahead. But how? On his terms.
Entirely on his terms. First step, though, was massive. He ordered a chariot road cleared all the way to the summit of Mount Tai.
A road up a mountain for chariots.
Imagine the engineering, the manpower, just carving a path for a full imperial procession up this sacred peak.
Incredible. So they go up.
They ascend the southern slope. At the top, he erects a stele, inscribed to commemorate the event, and performs several secret rituals. That's the fang part done. Then the whole procession goes down the northern slope to a smaller nearby hill, Liangfu. And there he performs another sacrifice, the Shan.
And the whole heaven-earth thing. Feng for heaven, Shan for earth.
That's the later Confucian interpretation. It became the standard view. But honestly, there's no solid evidence Qin Shi Huang saw it that way. It just became convention later on. Shows how even the meaning of the ritual itself could be reshaped.
So, in the end, after being let down by the Eastern scholars, what rites did he actually use?
He ditched their traditions entirely. He completed this hugely symbolic event using familiar Qin rituals from his homeland. The same rites used back in Yang to sacrifice to their high god.
So he reverted to his own tradition.
Exactly. His message to heaven, whatever it was sealed up according to Sin practice and its contents, lost to history. We'll never know exactly what he claimed or reported.
And the scholars he'd summoned initially, how did they react to being sidelined?
Oh, they were deeply disappointed. Resentful even, muttering under their breath. And then nature throws in some drama. A violent storm hits while the emperor is on the mountain.
Whoa. Bad omen.
That's certainly how the disgruntled scholars saw it. See? Heaven disapproves. He's unworthy. The emperor had to take shelter under a big tree.
So what did Qin Shi Huang do? Just wait it out?
He was briefly delayed, yeah. But then, ever the pragmatist, ever the master of turning things to his advantage, he does something brilliant. After the storm passes, he gratefully bestows an aristocratic rank, 5th rank grandee on the tree that sheltered him.
He gave a title to a tree.
Yep. 5th rank grandee was a seriously high honor, something you'd give a war hero. It was his way of spinning it. Even nature recognizes my mandate. Heaven protects me. This tree served me.
That's amazing, turning a potential disaster into a sign of favor.
It's pure political genius. And of course, legends grow. The texts don't say what kind of tree it was, but somehow it became known as a pine, the famous 5th rank pine.
And people misunderstood the title too, right? Thinking it meant 5 trees.
Exactly. It was one title for one tree, but popular imagination turned it into 5 separate trees. The 5th rank pines you see on Mount Tai today.
Yeah.
Definitely not the originals.
Still a great story.
And remarkably, fragments of Qin Shi Huang's actual inscribed stele from that ceremony. You can still see them today, down at the Dai Temple at the foot of the mountain.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it really brings it home. You can stand there and just imagine that grand, probably storm-swept ceremony. This powerful leader literally trying to write himself and his new dynasty into the cosmic order, using a mix of invented tradition and sheer will.
So wrapping up, we've looked at these 2 incredible symbolic acts by Qin Shi Huang. First, melting down all the weapons to cast those colossal, mysterious metal statues.
Ambiguous symbols of peace or domination.
And second, his audacious performance of the legendary, possibly invented Feng and Shan's sacrifices on Mount Tai.
Yeah, trying to co-opt Eastern tradition, failing, and then just doing it his own way.
These weren't just random power trips, were they? They were calculated strategies. tools to unify this vast, disparate empire and cement his unprecedented power in people's minds.
Absolutely. And these events connect to a much larger truth, really, about how power, legitimacy, and the stories we tell ourselves, the narrative, are all intertwined. The past isn't just a fixed set of facts. It's constantly being interpreted, reinterpreted. Sometimes, as we saw with Fang and Shan, maybe even invented to fit different needs, different agendas.
Qin Shi Huang was a master of this game, trying to control the symbols.
But even he couldn't totally control how they were understood later, could he? The metal men, the storm on the mountain, their meaning shifted. It shows that even supposedly absolute power has limits when it comes to controlling the story.
It really drives home that understanding history isn't just about memorizing dates and names. It's about digging into the why, discerning the motivations, seeing the symbolism, understanding the lasting impact of these actions, even when their original meaning gets, lost or twisted over time. It's about seeing the stories.
And maybe that leaves us with a thought to chew on. If even the first emperor, arguably one of the most powerful individuals in history, had to invent traditions, had to wrestle with controlling the narrative around his own symbols, what does that tell us about the nature of power and persuasion in any era, including our own? What symbols are being created and interpreted around us right now, and whose narrative are we actually buying into?
Imagine this. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. He's just done the impossible, basically, unified China. And now he's standing there, right at the edge of everything he knows, looking out at the ocean for the very first time. What goes through the mind of a conqueror like that, someone used to taming land, when they face something so utterly boundless?
It had to be a pretty profound moment. You conquer lands, rivers, people, but the sea, that's different. It wasn't just a line on a map he was seeing. It was maybe a challenge to what conquest even means.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into Qin Shi Huang's big Eastern tour back in 219 BCE. And look, this was way more than just a, victory parade. It was a journey that really shook up his worldview, pushed his ambitions into strange new places, and maybe even changed what he wanted most.
Yeah, it's this amazing mix of hard-nosed political strategy colliding head-on with, mysticism and ancient legends, a real turning point.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning of the tour. It wasn't about discovery initially, was it? It was pure politics.
Absolutely. The first major act was the Feng and Shan ceremony on Mount Tai. And this is significant. It's considered the first verifiable instance of this ceremony in history.
So more than just a ritual, what message was he sending?
It was huge. Performing it on Mount Tai, this incredibly sacred spot. That's like saying heaven approves of me. It's a cosmic stamp of legitimacy. But he didn't just stop there. He kept going east. And crucially, he made sacrifices to the local gods of Qi mountains, rivers, but specifically the 8 gods.
The gods of the old kingdom he'd just conquered.
Precisely. He wasn't just honoring them. He was basically saying, these gods answer to me now, not the old king of Qi. He traveled all over Qi performing these rituals. It was a spiritual takeover alongside the political one. Very thorough.
Wow. Okay, so he establishes his divine right, his political control, and then he keeps going east. And eventually he hits the coast, the Bohai Sea.
And for someone from the inland plains, seeing that vastness, it must have been staggering.
What kind of questions would pop into your head? I mean, you're the guy who conquered everything, or so you thought.
Right. What's actually out there? Is there another side? Who lives there? Are they like us? Or something else entirely? Maybe even gods. It's not just geography. It's existential, pushing the limits of what humans even are.
And right there, in that moment of wondering, he meets this scholar, Zhu Yan of Qi, and Zhu Yan has this mind-bending idea about the world.
Yeah, Zhu Yan's cosmology. He called China the Red County Divine Land Special, sure. But he said it was just one part of the lesser 9 provinces.
Okay, so China's big, but it's only one piece.
One piece of 9 continents, basically.
Yeah.
And each of those continents is surrounded by its own lesser sea. And all of that sits within one massive, great ocean.
Whoa, so the scale.
The scale is insane. Zhu Yan figured China was only 1/81st of the world's total land. Think about that. Even the Qin Empire, the land within the 4 seas, which felt huge, maybe 2% of the world Zhu Yan was describing.
So the emperor conquers his whole world, then finds out his world is just a tiny fraction of the real world.
Talk about a perspective shift.
That must have been the moment, right? He hits this physical limit, the ocean. He can't conquer that in the same way.
So the ambition has to pivot. If you can't conquer more land.
Maybe you conquer life itself, eternity.
It's almost logical, in a way, for someone like him.
What else is left when you've mastered the physical world? You go metaphysical. You aim for immortality.
And he really dug in on the coast, spent 3 whole months at Langya, that's near modern Qingdao. And it wasn't a vacation. He built this huge terrace, put up a monument praising himself.
Longest deal, yeah.
Oh, very important.
And moved 30,000 families there.
Yeah.
Gave them 12 years tax-free.
Smart move. Creates a loyal power base right there on the coast. Integrates the new territory.
And that inscription on the steel, it talks about unifying things, agriculture, peace. But the borders, heedless, is weird, aren't they?
They are. Some make sense. West to the shifting sands. Okay, the desert. East to the eastern sea, obviously. But then you get south to the north-facing doors. What's that? Something, maybe central Vietnam, which was optimistic, let's say. An ambition, not a fact. Right. And north past Daxia, still debated.
It might have been deliberately vague. Claiming the unknown.
But the key line, the real takeaway.
Wherever human footprints are found, none are not my subjects.
Chilling.
It redefines the empire. It's not about lines on a map anymore. It's about humanity. If people live there, it's his. His empire is the human world.
So while he's projecting this total earthly power at Langya, something else is happening, this coastal region.
Right.
It's buzzing with ideas about immortality.
Absolutely. It was a two-way street. The emperor's looking for what's next. And these local occultists, the Fan Shi from Yuan and Qi, they see an opportunity. Big time.
They were already peddling these ideas, right? This wasn't new for the emperor.
Not at all. The whole region was steeped in it. Tales of immortals, fairy islands out in the mist, Penglai, Halangzhen, Yingzhou, beings who never died, magic elixirs. Rulers before Qin Shi Huang had even sent people out looking for this stuff. It was an established belief system there.
So you can see how it would grab him. He's standing there looking at the misty sea, hearing all these stories.
And maybe thinking, look, can all these people be lying?
Yeah.
Can they all be in on some big conspiracy to fool me? Especially when he wants to believe.
The desire for immortality finds fertile ground.
That's how obsession starts, isn't it?
Yeah.
Enough people saying the same thing, especially when it taps into your deepest wish.
And he'd conquered everything else. Death was the final frontier.
Exactly.
Which brings us to Xu Shi, or Yufu, as he's often called, the Fang Shi who gets the big commission.
Right. The emperor picks him to lead this massive expedition. Thousands of young boys and girls are conscripted to go along.
And the story goes, the first trip fails.
Yeah. Shifu comes back, apparently makes up this story about meeting a sea god who demands tribute. More kids, craftsmen, grain.
And the emperor buys it.
He's desperate. He gives him 3,000 more youths, artisans, supplies. Zhu Fu sails off again.
Yeah.
Poof. Gone.
Mm-hmm.
Legend says he found a vast plain and great marsh and set himself up as king. Never came back.
That's the basis for that whole myth about him founding Japan, right?
That's the legend, yeah. But serious anthropology shows Japan was populated long, long before Zhu Fu could have arrived. Still, a great story.
But even though Xu Fu vanishes, he leaves something behind. Something practical.
Bizarrely, yes. A trend in garden design.
Get out!
The one pond, three mountains concept. The idea is, if the emperor can't physically get to the mythical islands of Penglai, Fangzhang, and Yingzhou.
He'll build his own.
Exactly. He had a lake dug near his capital, Shanyang, and put 3 artificial islands in it, miniature fairy isles. And later emperors copied it, even spread to Japan. You can still see echoes of that design in places like the Forbidden City today.
Amazing. From immortality quest to landscaping trend. But let's circle back to these Fang Shis. Today we just call them con artists, probably.
It's easy to think that way now, sure. But maybe it's not quite fair. There was this Qing Dynasty scholar, Wang Tan, who had this really interesting insight. He said he never really got the obsession of rulers like Qin Shi Huang or later Emperor Wu of Han until he personally saw a mirage off the coast of Shandong, a Hixin Lu.
A mirage, like heat haze in the desert, but over the sea.
Pretty much. What we now know is atmospheric refraction, light bending. Back then, totally inexplicable. Imagine seeing clear images of towers, islands, strange lands, just floating above the water where there should be nothing.
Okay, yeah, that would be convincing, especially if there were old texts talking about weird cloud formations that look like buildings.
Right. It suddenly makes, that's the idea. If he could find those, it would be undeniable proof of his right to rule. He sent 1,000 men to look.
And did they find them?
Nope. Found nothing.
Ouch. Another failure on the quest front.
And you can bet his successors, the Han Dynasty, made a big deal out of that failure.
How so?
Well, for the Han, who overthrew the Qin, it was perfect propaganda. See? Qin Shi Huang couldn't find the tripods. Heaven clearly didn't approve of them. It fit their narrative beautifully. You even see depictions of the failed search on Han tomb bricks.
Okay, so the tripod hunt is a bust. Then he continues southwest, down the Yangtze River, and he approaches another sacred site, the Shangshan Shrine.
Mount Shine, yeah.
Yeah.
And things get dramatic.
What happens?
A huge storm blows up, massive gale, makes it impossible for his boats to pass. He's furious. Demands to know who this Lord of Xiang is that dares defy him.
And who is it?
His scholars tell him it's the burial place of the wives of the ancient sage King Shun. The Shang Lords, or Shang Ladies.
Yeah.
Very important local goddesses in Chu culture.
So he's deep in the heartland of Chu, a place he conquered. Facing down their revered local deities, who are female, and they're blocking his path with a storm.
You can imagine how that went over with the emperor. An affront, disrespect from mere local gods, and women at that.
His reaction.
Pure imperial fury. He orders 3,000 convicts to march up Mount Xiang and chop down every single tree, strip it bare.
What?
To humiliate the goddesses. The mountain had reddish soil, apparently, so denuded it looked red like the color of convict robes. It was a symbolic punishment, shaming the mountain and its deities.
That's extreme, and probably didn't win him many friends in Chu.
You think.
Yeah.
It's often cited as one reason the Chu were so fiercely determined to rebel against Qin later on. That kind of deep cultural insult sticks.
A truly shocking story, but history loves throwing curveballs, doesn't it? Because there's another piece of evidence.
Right, the plot thickens. In 2007, these bamboo slips were found, the Yulu Qin slips. Actual Qin dynasty official documents.
And one of them talks about Mount Xiang.
It does. It's an imperial order issued from Mount Xiang. And it says, the emperor admired the trees and ordered them to be protected, put under imperial park regulations.
Wait, protected, not chopped down.
The complete opposite of the famous story recorded by Sima Qian in the Shiji.
So, what's the real story? We have the dramatic historical account of destruction and an official document ordering preservation. There's a date issue too, right?
Yeah, the slip is dated year 26 of his reign. The famous tour was year 28. Is it a typo? A different visit. A deliberate later rewriting of history in the Shiji.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much history is the event itself, and how much is the story told about the event later on, maybe for political reasons?
It's the core question, isn't it? How do we separate fact from narrative, especially centuries later? The truth might be way messier or more mundane than the legend.
But maybe there's a bigger pattern here. If we zoom out from these individual events, Mount Tai, the sea, Langya, the tripods, Mount Xiang, is there a thread connecting the whole tour?
There is, and it's a fascinating theory. If you map out Qin Shi Huang's route,
Mount Tai, Bohai Sea, Yangtze River, Mount Xiang.
it almost perfectly mirrors the legendary journey of the first sage king, the Yellow Emperor.
Really? The Yellow Emperor's journey is described in old texts.
Yeah. The Yellow Emperor supposedly traveled east to the sea, climbed Mount Tai, went south of the Yangtze, climbed Mount Xiang. It's uncannily similar.
So Qin Shi Huang wasn't just making it up as he went along.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
For a brand new empire trying to establish its legitimacy, what better way than to literally follow in the footsteps of the most ancient, revered ruler of all? He was consciously modeling his journey on the Yellow Emperors. It was a performance of legitimacy, grounding his new rule in the deepest stratum of historical myth, the ultimate precedent.
Wow, that ties everything together in a really profound way. It wasn't just politics or just immortality or just asserting power. It was all woven into this grand act of historical reenactment.
Exactly, a complex tapestry.
Yeah.
Political consolidation, yes. Encountering the unknown, absolutely. A desperate personal quest, for sure. But also this incredibly subtle, powerful claim to legitimacy by echoing the very first emperor figure.
It really paints a much richer picture of the man and his ambitions.
It does. And that contradiction about the trees in Mount Xiang, it serves as a great reminder, doesn't it?
How so?
It forces us to constantly ask, are we getting the facts, or are we getting a story shaped by later agendas? Maybe the truth is less traumatic, more complicated. And what does that mean for how we understand history, even history being made today? What stories are we choosing to believe now, and why? Imagine China, 215 BCE. The first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, has just done the impossible, really. He's unified this massive, sprawling country.
Yes, centuries of just brutal warfare finally over, the land's pacified. You'd think, okay, time for peace, stability.
Exactly. But what does a conqueror do when there's no one left to conquer? Well, our emperor, he goes on this big eastern tour, right into the lands he's just taken over.
And the official reason isn't just politics, checking out the new territory. It seems much more personal, almost spiritual.
That's the fascinating thing, isn't it? This weird paradox.
Totally. You've got this emperor peak power, apparently off seeking eternal life, but at the exact same time, he kicks off two enormous, super expensive wars, one north, one south.
And not just that. He also rolls out this incredibly controversial domestic policy, basically, taking down defenses across the empire.
It seems completely contradictory, doesn't it? Searching for immortality, but also launching wars and disarming his own cities. What was driving all this, and what did it actually mean for this brand new empire?
That's exactly what we're digging into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we're exploring the tangled motives and pretty unexpected results of Qin Shi Huang's huge and often really brutal vision. Okay, so let's start with that Eastern tour. His immediate goal, the personal one, was this quest for immortality.
Right.
He gets to this place, Jishi, kind of a mysterious spot, even back then. And pretty much the first thing he does is send a local guy, Lu Sheng, off to find this Fangxi like a cult master named Jian Zigao.
Ah, yes, the immortal Zigao. The story was he'd already achieved it, right? So he'd be living proof it was possible.
Exactly what the emperor wanted to hear. You can almost picture Qin Shi Huang there, staring out at the deep blue sea from Jishi, probably dreaming of those, like, legendary fairy islands out there.
Yearning for eternal life.
But at the same time, you can feel his pride. He's the ruler of this water virtue dynasty.
Yeah.
It was a big cosmological idea. His reign had this divine power to unify, like water flowing together.
So it's this mix of deep personal desire and, well, immense imperial ego, standing there facing the ocean.
And what's wild is Jishi itself. We still don't know exactly where it was. We know it existed, huge historical importance, but the precise spot, still debated.
Yeah, the physical Jishi Gate, whatever that actually was, maybe a palace gate, maybe symbolic, maybe even a mountain pass it's lost. But the inscription he left there, that's where things get really interesting politically.
Okay. So not just about finding immortals.
Not at all. Buried in this inscription, which probably talked about his achievements and maybe the immortality quest, was this massive policy announcement. Tear down city walls and defensive river dikes across the whole empire.
Wow. Just like that. Announced on a stone by the sea.
Pretty much. And it wasn't entirely out of the blue strategy-wise. It echoes something Confucius supposedly did centuries earlier in the state of Lu.
Confucius, how does he fit in?
Well, the story goes, when Confucius held power briefly, he launched this policy called dismantling the three capitals. He literally tore down the main fortress walls of the three most powerful aristocratic families in Lu. He justified it using ancient rules about wall sizes, but the real point was political. It weakened those powerful clans, took away their ability to easily defend themselves or shelter rebels, and, strengthened the central ruler. It's about control.
Ah, I see. So using a sort of high-minded justification for a very practical, maybe ruthless political goal.
Exactly. And Qin Shi Huang seems to be doing something similar, but on an empire-wide scale.
So how deeply was this principle baked into the Qin strategy, this idea of strengthen the trunk and weaken the branches? What was the end game for him with this disarmament?
Absolute centralization. That was the Qin model. If you're ruling from the center, you can't have powerful regional bases challenging you, knocking down those walls, breaking those dikes. It was about removing the physical means for separatism and rebellion before they could even start.
So ripping out potential problems at the root.
Precisely. Though it's worth noting, the evidence suggests this wasn't about every single little village wall. Later Qin history shows it targeted the fortifications of famous cities, the major regional centers.
Right, the places that could actually mount a serious challenge.
Exactly.
And this strategy, this internal disarmament, it was powerful enough that later dynasties actually copied it.
They did, yeah. Sometimes disastrously, though. Like the Song dynasty, centuries later, they took it maybe too far and left their northern frontiers really exposed by weakening local defenses.
Okay, so for the Qin, what did this policy really signal, besides just centralization?
It signaled ruthless efficiency, but wrapped in this kind of benevolent language on the Jishi inscription. The inscription talks about how demolishing walls will open up transportation, let people farm and weave in peace, painting this picture of unity and prosperity.
A nice story.
A very nice story. But even as he's putting up this inscription about peace and farming, something else is brewing, something that points in a very different direction.
Yeah, because just as the emperor's focus shifts north, the whole immortality quest takes another twist, right?
It does. Lu Sheng, the guy sent to find the immortal Xianmen Zigao, comes back.
But empty-handed on the immortal front.
Empty-handed on immortals, yes. But he brings back something else, something he claims is maybe even better. A diagrammed book. A prophecy, supposedly straight from the gods, about the future of the Qin dynasty.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What did it say?
Just one single really ominous sentence. The one who will destroy Qin is Hu. That's it. Wang Qinxia Hu Yo.
Who? What does who mean?
Well, that's the crucial part. The character Hu could mean a few different things, like an old man, even a type of weapon. But in the context of the time, the most immediate and frankly most logical interpretation was the Hu people, the northern nomads.
The ones living beyond the northern frontier.
Exactly. And remember, it wasn't just text, it was a diagrammed book. That lost illustration probably made it crystal clear who referred to. It likely pointed directly at those northern groups, probably the Xiongnu.
It fits the pattern,
Yeah.
right. The Chinese often categorize barbarians by direction yi east, strong west, man south.
And Hu north. Precisely. So the diagram likely sealed that interpretation for the emperor.
And his reaction was, well, typical Qin Shi Huang, I suppose.
Decisive is one word for it. He immediately orders General Meng Tian to take a massive army, something like 300,000 troops, and attack the Xiongnu.
300,000. Just think about that for a second. That Jishi inscription promising peace and quiet farming.
Yeah, suddenly sounds pretty hollow, doesn't it? Replaced by the sound of marching armies heading north, the speed and scale of that pivot is just staggering.
So Meng Tian goes north. Was the campaign successful?
Hugely successful, militarily speaking. Meng Tian drives the Xiongnu back, reclaims this strategically vital area called the Ordos Loop. It's in modern Inner Mongolia.
Okay.
And he starts linking up the existing defensive walls built by the old states. This is basically the origin story for the Great Wall, as we kind of picture it. 44 new counties established in this reclaimed territory.
Wow. How did they populate them? You can't just leave empty land up there.
No, you can't. And the Qin solution was, well, efficient and brutal. They forcibly relocated convicts from the interior, shipped them north.
So forced migration on a massive scale.
Absolutely. For the Qin state, manpower was everything.
Yeah.
Moving people around like game pieces was just how they operated. And to support all this, the army, the new settlements, Meng Tian built incredible infrastructure.
Like roads.
Roads like you wouldn't believe. An east-west road running along the new Great Wall defenses, and then this incredible north-south highway called the Qin Straight Road.
The straight road.
Literally, over 800 kilometers long, engineered to be almost perfectly straight. They cut through mountains, filled valleys. Just sheer ruthless efficiency to create this direct artery from the capital region up to the northern frontier.
Incredible engineering. But wait, looking at the timeline here, something feels off about this whole northern campaign story, especially the prophecy part.
Ah, you noticed it too. The records, like Sima Qin's Shiji, they say Meng Tian guarded that northern frontier, building the wall and the road, keeping the Xiongnu away for over 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
But the prophecy, the one that supposedly started it all, that came back with Lu Sheng in the 32nd year of the emperor's reign, which is 215 BCE. Meng Tian died in 210 BCE.
It's only 6 years later, not over 10 years.
Exactly. The numbers don't add up.
So what does that mean?
Well, it raises a really big question. What's fascinating is if you just remove the whole prophecy story, if you take Lu Sheng and the diagrammed book out of the picture,
Yeah.
the timelines in the historical accounts actually line up pretty well. Meng Tian could have been campaigning and building up there for a longer period, starting earlier.
So the suspicion is...
The suspicion is very strong that the northern campaign against the Xiongnu was probably planned much earlier, maybe from the very beginning of the unified empire.
And the prophecy story.
Probably later invention. Propaganda may be cooked up during the reign of the second emperor, Qin Shi Huang's son, Hu Hai.
Oh, hi. Wait, his name starts with who?
Bingo. The theory is the story might have been circulated to demoralize people, suggesting the dynasty was fated to be destroyed by Hu Hai himself. A pretty cynical twist, if true.
Wow. Okay, so if there was no prophecy driving the Northern War, why did Qin Shi Huang launch such a massive, costly campaign up there?
And not just there, right? There was something happening in the south, too.
At the exact same time. That's what's so striking.
Right.
While Meng Tian is marching north, the Qin dynasty is running another equally huge military operation way down south against the Bayou peoples.
The Bayou, the peoples of the subtropical south.
That's them. And get this. The soldiers conscripted for this army weren't your standard Qin recruits. The state specifically drafted 3 groups.
tour.
Fugitives, so basically people living outside the law, unregistered migrants.
Yeah.
Matrilocal sons-in-law men who married into their wife's family and lived with them, which was a really low social status, almost like a servant. And merchants.
Merchants, why them?
Because under Qin law, derived from Shenyang's reforms generations earlier, merchants were considered, well, unproductive parasites. The state prioritized agriculture and military service. Commerce was suppressed.
So these three groups, they were all seen as kind of undesirable, socially unstable elements. Exactly. Rootless migrants, men with low status, and a class the state actively disliked. From the Qin government's perspective, these guys were basically a disposable underclass, perfect for dangerous, grueling campaigns far from home. It tells you a lot about how the Qin state viewed its own people purely as resources to be managed and deployed.
Okay, so this brings us right back to that fundamental question.
Yeah.
The empire is unified. The wars are supposedly over. Why not let everyone just recover? Why launch two massive wars, north and south, at the same time? It really does make him sound like he had this insatiable desire for victory, like later historians said.
It does seem that way on the surface, but I think there's a deeper, more systemic explanation here. It's about the very nature of the Qin state itself.
How so?
The Qin state fundamentally was an engine of war. That's how it conquered China. Shenyang's reforms had geared the entire society towards military conquest. For generations, the way you got ahead status, land, wealth was by fighting and winning. So suddenly, the world is unified. Your former enemies are now your fellow subjects. That main path to advancement, the one the whole society was built around, is just gone overnight.
Right. What do all those soldiers, those tigers and wolves, as they were called, do now?
Exactly. How do you turn tigers and wolves into peaceful sheep? Especially when the state itself has trained them for generations to be predators. From the emperor's perspective, maybe the most practical solution was just to find them new enemies.
So the northern and southern campaigns were, in a way, an outlet.
An outlet for all that martial energy, yes. It kept hundreds of thousands of soldiers busy, gave them a path to potential rewards, however brutal, and conveniently it used those undesirable social elements, the fugitives, sons-in-law, merchants, as cannon fodder and forced labor for these incredibly tough campaigns, while also expanding the empire, of course.
And that southern campaign must have been incredibly tough, fighting in those like subtropical mountains and jungles. That's completely different from the warfare Qin armies were used to on the northern plains.
Immensely challenging. Logistically, it was a nightmare. Which brings us to another amazing piece of Qin engineering.
Don't tell me. Another road.
Even better. A canal. The Lingual Canal down in modern Guangxi.
What did it do?
It did something ingenious. It connected the Shang River, which flows north into the Yangtze system, with the Li River, which flows south into the Pearl River system.
So it linked central China with the deep south by water.
Precisely. Suddenly, supplies, troops, everything could be shipped by boat directly into the heart of the Bayou territories. It was a game changer for the campaign.
That's incredible. Was it a simple canal?
Far from it. It had locks, pound locks, to manage the different water levels between the rivers. We're talking about 36 of them. This technology, as the great scholar Joseph Needham pointed out, appeared in China more than 1,000 years before we see it documented in Europe. It's astonishing.
Wow. So with the canal helping, they eventually pacified the south.
They did. They incorporated the region into the Qin Commandery system, the standard administrative units, and, just like in the north, they populated it with forced migrants.
More convicts, presumably.
Primarily, yes. And for these people, mostly northerners, being sent to that subtropical south full of venomous snakes, insects, tropical diseases they had no immunity to, it must have been like being sent to a living hell.
It sounds like those regions served a specific purpose beyond just territory.
Absolutely. You can see a parallel perhaps with how Tsarist Russia used Siberia or how Britain used early Australia, places to exile criminals, dissidents, and generally unwanted populations, expendable people for expanding and holding difficult territory.
But all this constant warfare, this relentless use of forced labor, sending people to die in faraway lands, that must have created huge resentment, right?
Immense resentment. You can't run an empire like that indefinitely without consequences. While it solved the immediate problem of what to do with the Qin war machine and undesirables, it sowed the seeds of massive discontent among the ordinary people. It created a whole new, huge problem that would eventually come back to bite the dynasty hard.
So we end up with this really complex picture of Qin Shi Huang's reign, don't we? This deeply personal quest for his own immortality, happening right alongside this incredibly ruthless, efficient state machine, grinding away, building, conquering, controlling.
Yeah, the personal and the political seem completely intertwined. His vision was undeniably grand, unifying China, standardizing everything, but the methods were often incredibly brutal, built on this foundation of perpetual conflict and control.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, that whole engine of war idea?
It does. Can a state that's fundamentally built for war ever truly find peace? Or does it always need an enemy? Does that relentless energy, so effective for conquest, inevitably turn inwards or outwards, sowing the seeds of its own destruction?
It makes you think about the unintended consequences, too. Policies designed for stability, for control, but built on this restless human energy, this ingrained system of conflict. What happens when the conflict runs out or when the cost becomes too high?
These are the big questions, right? The kind of complexities that make the first emperor's legacy so enduring, so controversial, and so incredibly fascinating to look back on even now.
Absolutely. A huge, complex legacy casting a very long shadow. Definitely something to keep thinking about. In this section, we'll be covering the most important historical event of the burning of books and burying of scholars. It's a story that really echoes, doesn't it, even today. We're looking at the Qin dynasty, 213 BCE. So just 8 years after the first emperor finally brought all those warring states together, unified China.
Right, but unified doesn't mean peaceful. Not at all. The empire was this, well, enormous machine. Think about state-mandated labor conscription, probably bigger than anything seen even during the Warring States period, which is already brutal.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands of people just uprooted, sent off to build the Great Wall, the Straight Road, or stuck in garrisons miles from home.
And the pressure on local officials, immense. They had quotas to meet, which led to, massive displacement and really tragically just a huge number of wrongful convictions, a terrible time for ordinary people.
So much suffering, forced relocations.
But here's a fascinating little twist. Retribution for the corrupt officials. It came fast. Like that same year. Oh, yeah. Many of them ended up facing the exact same punishment they'd dished out. Exile to the wall or down south.
Wow. So not just justice, then?
Not entirely. It was smart politics, too. The emperor uses one group to get things done, then turns on them to sort of calm public anger, show everyone who's boss. It's a classic move, really. An authoritarian playbook standard.
Okay, so after all that intensity, you'd think things might settle down a bit, maybe some calm.
You would think, but no. Something else was brewing, right in that apparent quiet. Prime Minister Li Si, the main architect of Qin's legalist thinking.
Yeah.
He proposes something that honestly still shocks people today. A truly audacious move for intellectual control. The burning of books.
And this wasn't just out of the blue, right? It came from somewhere specific.
Exactly. It all kicked off during a debate. A pretty fiery one, actually, at the first emperor's birthday banquet, right there in Jianyang Palace.
A birthday party debate leads to burning books.
Okay, set the scene. So you had Chamberlain Zhu Qingshan basically singing the emperor's praises, saying how brilliant it was to get rid of the old entitlement system, land grants to nobles and bring in the commandery system, centralized control, Qin style.
Standard court flattery, maybe.
Pretty much. But then this scholar, Chu Yu, he stands up. He was from the old state of Qi.
Okay.
And he basically says, hold on, this new commandery system, it's going to fail. He argues they have to go back to the old ways, the wisdom of the ancient sages, back to enfeoffment for lasting peace.
Whoa, that's bold. Directly challenging the emperor and Li Si's whole project.
Extremely bold. It wasn't just some academic point he was making. He was hitting right at the core of the emperor's power and Li Si's legalist framework, telling the most powerful man alive his system was flawed because it wasn't old enough.
So how does Li Si react?
Pure legalism. Brutal. Clear. He basically says, look, society changes. Constantly. Ancient traditions, they're irrelevant for governing now.
Okay, the progress argument.
Right. But his big worry was these scholars. Not learning from the present, but from antiquity, he said. Using old ideas to criticize his policies. Stirring up dissent. They were debating the new laws, gossiping about them in the streets. He saw it as dangerous. Seditious, even.
Controlling the narrative, so that leads to the proposal.
Exactly. And it was radical. The emperor approved it almost immediately. Chillingly specific.
What were the details?
Burn all historical records, except Jian's, of course. All private collections of the Book of Odes, the Book of Documents, anything from the 100 schools of thought, hand them over, destroy them.
And if you didn't?
Severe punishments. Talk about the odes or documents in public, execution.
Just for talking?
Just for talking. And the big one,
Yeah.
using the past to criticize the present, that got your whole clan wiped out.
Clan extermination.
Yeah. And officials who didn't report it, same punishment for them. You had 30 days to hand over your books, miss the deadline, you get tattooed and sent off for forced labor on the Great Wall.
Brutal. Were there any exceptions?
A few. Practical stuff was okay. Medicine, divination, agriculture, those books were spared.
Practical knowledge is safe.
Right. And if you wanted to study law, here's the really revolutionary part. Take officials as teachers. Forget independent scholars. Learn the state's law from state functionaries.
So it wasn't just about getting rid of books.
No, not primarily. The main goal was political. Wipe out the histories of the states Qin had conquered. Make sure only the Qin version of history survived. Absolute uniformity in thought.
But how much damage does it actually do to literature? I mean, we often picture this huge bonfire of scrolls.
That's the common image, but the reality might be a bit different. It might have been less severe physically than we think.
How so?
Well, books back then were mostly bamboo and wood slips, heavy, hard to circulate widely. Plus, centuries of war had already destroyed a lot of texts. So the real aim seems to have been suppression and confiscation, getting the books into the hands of imperial scholars, locking them away. Not necessarily total annihilation, but definitely stopping their spread. The biggest crime wasn't just having the books, it was talking about them. And especially, like we said, using the past to criticize the present. That was the real danger they saw.
So confiscation more than outright destruction.
It seems like it was a major part of it. Control, not just elimination. And, this idea wasn't totally new. The legalist philosopher Han Fei had actually suggested something similar to a previous ruler.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but back then, Qin was seen as kind of a cultural desert. Didn't have many books of its own to worry about. It only became, urgent after they conquered all these other states with their own rich histories and philosophies. Suddenly, controlling thought across this diverse empire, that became priority number one.
Okay, so the book burning is happening, or at least the suppression. But the Qin state machine keeps grinding on, right?
Oh, absolutely. It doesn't slow down. We jump forward just a year to 212 BCE, the 35th year of the emperor's reign. The empire's running full steam. And this is when we get the other really infamous event, the burying of the scholars.
Right, the second part of that infamous phrase.
And it happens alongside these just colossal building projects, which really tell you something about the emperor's mindset.
Like the Afang Palace, that legendary place?
Exactly, the Afang Palace. Everyone imagines this immense, finished palace. And the story goes that the rebel leader, Xiang Yu, burned it to the ground later.
Yeah, that's the story I know.
Well, get this. Modern archaeology, it gives us a real aha moment. Excavations show it was massive, all right, but it was never finished.
Unfinished. Seriously.
Seriously. It was this gigantic construction site, basically. Xiang Yu did burn palaces in the capital, Xiangyang, existing ones, but not the legendary, never completed Afang.
Wow. Okay, that changes the picture. A massive, unfinished dream. And what about his tomb? The Lishan Mausoleum.
That one was built. Construction started the moment he took the throne as king of Qin decades earlier. Employed, estimates say, over 700,000 convicts.
700,000.
It's mind-boggling and supposedly incredibly luxurious inside. Descriptions talk about rivers of mercury, ceilings mimicking the heavens, just unbelievable scale.
So how do we understand these projects? Just ego, cruelty?
Well, there are layers. Traditional Confucian historians definitely saw it as greed, cruelty, hubris, and you can see why.
Sure.
A more legalist or sympathetic view might say it was maybe a brutal necessity, projecting power, unifying the state through shared massive effort.
Okay.
But the psychological angle is maybe the most revealing. Qin Shi Huang.
Well, he seems like a classic paranoid megalomaniac.
Paranoid megalomaniac.
Yeah. Huge pride, desperate for glory, but also deeply insecure. Probably goes back to his childhood being a hostage in another state.
Ah, right. That makes sense. So these unprecedented palaces, the tomb, unifying writing, weights, measures, even trying to unify thought. It all fits this pattern, this internal logic, a need for absolute control to manage his insecurity, a need for recognition on a scale never seen before. It's that Greek idea, megalothymia, the desire to be recognized as the greatest. He needed to control everything.
A control freak on an imperial scale, driven by this powerful but maybe fragile ego.
Exactly. And this need for control, this paranoia, it leads directly to a breaking point with the Feng Shi.
The Feng Shi. Those are the occultists, the ones looking for the elixir of immortality.
Precisely. The masters of methods. He employed lots of them. Two in particular, Hu Sheng and Lu Sheng, kept failing to find this elixir.
He can't have been happy about that.
He wasn't, and before they skipped town, they apparently talked privately, criticized the emperor, called him stubborn, arrogant, obsessed with power, too reliant on harsh officials, buried in paperwork. They basically said, how could a guy like that possibly achieve immortality?
Ouch. Did the emperor hear about this?
Oh, yes. Whether the conversation happened exactly like that or not, the sentiment was clear. And it illustrates a huge flaw in his system, right? Everything flows to the top, to him, the sole brain, which is fine if the brain is working perfectly, but disastrous if it gets overloaded or, well, paranoid.
Right.
When Ha Sheng and Lu Sheng fled, the emperor was furious, absolutely enraged. He felt they'd betrayed him after he'd given them so much status, slandered him.
So what did he do?
He ordered this huge investigation, targeted scholars, which was a pretty broad term then, basically intellectuals in the capital, Jian, and it just spiraled, became a witch hunt.
And this leads to the burying.
Yes, over 460 scholars were implicated, found guilty, and executed by being buried alive in a pit. That's the burying of the scholars.
Buried alive. Horrific.
Truly horrific. And then his own son, Fusu, the eldest, steps in.
The heir.
The heir. He bravely pleads with his father. He says basically, these scholars, they all follow Confucius. Punishing them so harshly like this, I'm afraid it will cause unease across the empire.
He specifically mentioned Confucius.
He did. But pointing this out, trying to reason with him, it just made the emperor angrier. Fusu was exiled, sent off to the northern frontier to supervise the army building the Great Wall.
Wow. Punished for trying to advise his father. So this brings up that puzzle, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it remembered as the burying of the Confucians, the Kongru, if it was actually triggered by these Fangxi, these occultists? And why did Fusu bring up Confucius?
That's the key question, and it's crucial to understand. The burning and the burying were separate events, a year apart, and neither was initially aimed exclusively at Confucians.
So the popular image is wrong.
Largely, yes. The idea that the burying was an anti-Confucian purge, that seems to be mostly a creation of later Han Dynasty scholars. They wanted a martyrdom story for their own school. They conflated the two events and framed the burying as targeting Confucians.
So who are the victims then?
Likely a mix of intellectuals. The line between a Confucian scholar and an occultist, or Fangxi, was actually pretty blurry back then. Many scholars dabbled in both philosophy and, esoteric arts like divination or alchemy. So it seems less like a targeted ideological purge and more like an indiscriminate lashing out, an act born of the emperor's personal rage against the whole scholarly community who he felt had let him down or challenged him.
Indiscriminate rage, not a calculated strike against one school of thought. That's quite different. So let's play devil's advocate. If the first emperor had listened to the Confucians, maybe put them in charge instead of legalists like Levi, would things have been better, more harmonious, more tolerant?
It's tempting to think so, but probably not. And this gets at something deeper about human nature, perhaps. A tendency towards what you might call monism.
Monism?
Yeah, the idea that our own way, what's familiar to us, is the only right way. We tend to see the unfamiliar as strange, maybe even dangerous. Real pluralism, accepting different ways of thinking and living. That often only happens when different groups are kind of forced together, when they realize they can't actually destroy or escape each other.
That's a sobering thought. You see echoes of that elsewhere, don't you?
Absolutely. Think about the book burnings in Nazi Germany in the 1930s. That wasn't just a top-down government order. A lot of it was driven by, spontaneous, fervent support from university students, public demonstrations. It shows that tendency exists within society itself, not just in rulers. That desire to purge what feels alien or threatening.
So you're saying even the Confucians might have had this impulse?
Well, look at some of the great Confucian thinkers themselves, like Mencius or Sunzi. Despite advocating for benevolence and righteousness, they also seem to want to monopolize the conversation. They wanted their doctrines to be the only ones guiding society. They certainly weren't fans of intellectual diversity when it came to what they saw as harmful ideas.
Is there evidence for that?
There's a debated story, but one likely pushed by Zunzi about Confucius himself early in his career, supposedly executing a high-ranking official named Xiaosheng Mao, why? For basically disrupting the political order with his dissenting views.
Confucius executing someone for dissent.
It's debated, but the fact the story exists and that someone like Zunzi thought it was plausible or even admirable tells you something. Both the legalists and the Confucians, deep down, seem to believe that a stable society needed a single, unified set of values. Any ideas that challenged that unity, they had to be stamped out. So once China was unified, some kind of thought control was probably coming, regardless of whether it was Lisi or a Confucian scholar calling the shots.
That puts a different spin on it. So the method might have differed, but the goal of uniformity
Was likely shared. And here's the real irony. The Qin burning of books is infamous, right? But in terms of actual severity, maybe it wasn't as bad as some later literary purges in Chinese history. And arguably, no one was actually executed just for the book burning itself. Its terrible reputation comes partly from just how blatant and provocative it was.
So later rulers found better ways.
Much more effective ways. Forget burning books. The real game changer was the imperial examination system, developed later. Once you make official exams based on specific state-approved textbooks the only way to get power, status, a career.
Then all the other books just fade away.
Exactly. They become irrelevant. You don't need to burn them. People just stop reading them because they won't help you get ahead. It's a far more subtle and arguably more effective form of long-term thought control.
Wow. Okay, but amidst all this suppression, were there any acts of resistance? Quiet ones, maybe?
There's a lovely little anecdote. After the book burning decree, a Confucian scholar named Chen Yu goes to visit Kung Fu. Now, Kung Fu was a direct descendant of Confucius himself. Chen Yu is worried, for Kung Fu's safety, for the family library, but Kung Fu is incredibly calm. He basically says, "Don't worry about me. What I study," meaning the Confucian classics, "is useless learning right now. Only a few friends care about it. I'll just hide the books carefully and wait for a future generation that will want them again."
It's quite moving. Hiding knowledge for the future. A quiet defiance.
A belief that these ideas would endure, even if suppressed for a time.
Okay, let's shift back to the timeline. We're now in 211 BCE, the 36th year of the emperor's reign. Things are still tense, and then omens start appearing.
Yeah, the universe seems to be sending messages, and they are not good. First, a meteorite falls in Dongjin Prefecture.
A meteorite. Okay, unusual.
But then it gets weirder. Someone secretly carves words onto the meteorite.
What do they write?
The first emperor will die, and the land will be divided.
Whoa, that's direct. Treasonous, even. How did the emperor react?
Predictably badly. He couldn't find out who did it, so he had everyone living near where the meteorite fell executed. And then he had the meteorite itself ground into powder.
Brutal, just wiped out the whole area.
It shows his cruelty, for sure, but also maybe how much public resentment was actually simmering just below the surface, right?
Yeah.
Someone felt strongly enough to carve that message.
True. Were there other signs?
Yes, a celestial one. Astronomers reported that Mars lingered near Antares. In their astrology, Antares represented the emperor, and Mars was a star of misfortune, war, punishment. So Mars hanging around Antares, a very bad sign for the ruler. He was apparently quite depressed about it, even commissioned a poem.
So, signs from the earth, signs from the heavens.
And one more. From the spirit world, perhaps. That autumn, an imperial envoy traveling at night is stopped near Huayin Mountain by a mysterious man.
Okay.
This man hands the envoy a jade disc and says cryptically, "This year the primal dragon will die." Then he vanishes.
The primal dragon. And what about the jade disc?
This is the really eerie part. The envoy takes the disc back to the emperor, and the emperor recognizes it. It was the very same jade disc he himself had thrown into the Yangtze River 8 years earlier as a sacrifice for safe passage.
No, it came back after 8 years.
Miraculously returned with that ominous message. So now you have warnings from heaven, earth, and the spirit realm, all pointing towards his demise. Even for the first emperor, that had to be chilling.
You'd think so.
Hmm?
How did he react to all this? Did he believe it?
Well, he tried to rationalize it. He apparently muttered something like, "Oh, mountain spirits, their prophecies are only good for 1 year, and primal dragon, well, that just means the principal man, that's probably him." But he was clearly rattled.
You can imagine.
It was already autumn. The Qin calendar started its new year in the 10th month, which is coming up fast, so his desperate thought process seems to have been, if I can just make it past the start of the new year, the prophecy, this year's prophecy anyway, becomes void.
He's trying to outrun fate, basically, by gaming the calendar.
Exactly. So what does he do? He has a divination performed. What's auspicious right now? The answer comes back. Travel and migration are auspicious.
Travel and migration.
So he acts immediately. First, he orders a massive forced migration. 30,000 households shifted up to the northern frontier, ticking the migration box.
Okay.
Then, just 3 days into the brand new Qin year, hoping he's dodged the bullet, he hastily sets out himself on his 5th imperial tour, ticking the travel box.
The 5th tour. But it turned out to be his last, didn't it?
His very last. And we actually have archaeological evidence now from a bamboo text called the Zaozheng Shu found in a tomb. It seems to confirm he knew he was dying. He was already gravely ill before he left. He lamented that destiny seemed fixed, unchangeable, and he basically admitted this whole tour was a desperate last-ditch attempt to somehow defy fate.
Wow. So he knew, and he went anyway. A final gamble against destiny.
A gamble he lost. He wouldn't return from that journey.
So bringing this all together, what does this intense period, the burning, the burying, the omens, the final journey, what does it all mean for you listening to this ancient history unfold?
Well, we've seen this relentless drive for unity, haven't we? But also how fragile that power really was, even for someone like the first emperor. We've seen the complexity of human nature, the megalomania, the fear, the desire for control, and this constant battle over information, over thought itself.
It makes you think, doesn't it? Considering what we've discussed about human nature, about controlling narratives, about how different methods of control work, what forms of thought control might exist in our world today?
Exactly. They might not involve literally burning books or burying scholars. They could be far more subtle, but maybe just as pervasive. It's definitely something to mull over. Have you ever thought about how China actually became China? This one man is, well, arguably the central figure.
He really is. An emperor who basically forged a nation, unified warring states.
Yeah.
It's an incredible story, but it's also seen as, a major tyrant.
Exactly. Revered and reviled. And that's what we're getting into today. This isn't just dusty old history. It's about power, ambition, and honestly, the fascinating, maybe even scary psychology of a leader who changed the world.
Right. Our goal here is to really unpack his final journey. That last big trip he took. We'll look at what he did, try to figure out why he did it, and see how those last actions set the stage for, well, the next 2,000 years of Chinese history.
And we'll dig into those little details, the things that maybe seem small, but really show his deepest fears and the big kind of tragic ironies of his life.
You could almost see him as like the founder CEO of China Incorporated,
Yeah.
a massive world-changing startup, but built with some pretty brutal methods.
Okay, so let's set the scene for this final act. It's 210 BCE. Qin Shi Huang has been emperor for 37 years. The empire's unified, on paper at least, but he seems, agitated.
Yeah, restless is a good word. He decides to go on his 5th massive tour of the empire.
And the timing. It's the 3rd day of the Lunar New Year.
Right. That's prime family time. You stay home, you reflect, you celebrate. You definitely don't hit the road for a massive empire-spanning tour.
It almost feels like he's running from something, doesn't it? Or maybe desperately searching for something.
Could be. And who goes with him is also key. He brings his left chancellor, Li Si, a very powerful guy.
And crucially, his youngest son, Hu Hai, the one he seems to favor most.
Hu Hai. Meanwhile, the right chancellor, Feng Kuaji, he stays back in the capital, Xianyang.
So why Hu Hai? Why the youngest son on this particular trip?
Well, the official records, they don't spell it out. But history gives us a pattern, When a powerful ruler starts showing signs of age, maybe sickness.
Ambitious heirs stick close.
Exactly. You stay near the center of power, just in case. Makes you wonder, right? Was Hu Hai already playing the long game? A calculated move?
It certainly looks suspicious in hindsight. Okay, so these tours weren't just sightseeing. They were performances. Big rituals.
Absolutely. Political theater on a grand scale.
The first leg takes them south to Yunmeng Marsh. This is in the 11th month. And he performs this long-distance sacrifice to a legendary sage king, Shun.
Then they head east, along the Yangtze River. Now, that river could be treacherous.
Right, so they had to make a big detour, like 40 miles out of the way, just to find a safe crossing point before climbing Mount Kuaiji.
Which tells you something about his determination, or maybe obsession. He wasn't letting logistics stop these rituals.
And Mount Kuaiji is a big deal. He holds this grand ceremony to honor Yu the Great, the mythical hero who tamed China's floods.
And another sacrifice, this time looking out towards the Eastern Sea. Plus, his usual move, erecting a stone stele, an inscription.
Always with the inscriptions, leaving his mark literally carved in stone.
And these rituals, they carry hidden weight. That phrase, gazing upon the southern sea, it wasn't literal from the mountaintop. It was a separate ritual right at the coast.
Okay.
But the real kicker is the location. See, old Sui dynasty rules. A lord could only sacrifice to mountains and rivers in his own territory.
Right.
So when the first emperor does these rituals all over the place, in lands that used to belong to others?
He's basically saying, this is all mine now. Not just politically, but spiritually too.
Precisely. It's a constant, powerful declaration of his supreme authority over everything. A cosmic claim repeated again and again.
And those inscriptions weren't just, I was here. They laid down the law, sometimes pretty harshly.
Oh, yeah. Kuai one had some really intense new rules, a kind of moral correction for the locals, supposedly.
It famously said, a widow with a son who remarries is unchaste, a crime worse than death.
Pretty brutal towards women. But men didn't get off scot-free either.
No, it also said, if a husband acts as a borrowed boor, killing him is not a crime.
A borrowed boor, basically. A man who slipped around indiscriminately. And the law explicitly said, yeah, private citizens could kill him. No punishment.
Wow. So what's behind that?
Well, some scholars, like Gu Yanwu, centuries later, thought it was about fixing local morals, going back to an earlier, supposedly looser time.
Okay, a moral crusade.
Maybe. But there's a more Qin Shi Huang explanation. Remember, his state was built on ruthless efficiency.
Like Shenyang's reforms, dividing families to boost the tax base.
Exactly. So this focus on strict marriage rules, it probably wasn't just about morality. It was likely about the household registration system.
How so?
Casual relationships, unclear paternity that messes up the records. And those records were vital for taxes, for conscripting soldiers, for forcing labor on his big projects.
So it's social control right down to the bedroom, all serving the state's bottom line.
Pretty much. It shows how total his vision of state control was. Brutally pragmatic.
Okay, so after Mount Kuaiji, the tour heads north, back up the coast towards Lengya. He loved Lengya, that seaside spot.
Yeah, he did. And that's where things get really strange.
The giant fish incident.
The giant fish. The emperor himself grabs a repeating crossbow and shoots this huge fish dead.
Why? Why on earth would the emperor be personally shooting fish? It's odd.
It is. And the ZZ Tum Jin, that usually sober history text, it just mentions it happened. No explanation. Which just makes it weirder.
Okay, so we need to dig deeper for that one.
Right. For the answer, you got to look at the Shiji, Sima Qian's history. It involves those occultists, the Fangxi.
The quest for immortality, guys. Zhu Fu and his crowd.
The very same. They've been based at Lengya for years, spending a fortune, supposedly finding the elixir of life, and failing miserably.
So the emperor shows up, and they need an excuse. Fast.
You got it. So they spin this new tale. Oh, the elixir's right there on the mythical island of Penglai.
But there's always a but.
Giant sharks, they keep blocking our ships. We can't get through.
Convenient.
Very. Their solution. The emperor needs to send out elite archers to kill these things.
Okay, still sounds pretty thin. Why would he buy that now?
Two crucial things changed. First, he had a dream. A weird one. Fighting a sea god who looked human.
Oh.
His diviners interpret it. They say, look, you can't see a real sea god. Their presence is marked by big fish and dragons. Since your sacrifices have been perfect, this must be an evil god blocking you. Kill it, and the good gods, the ones with the elixir, will show up.
Connecting the dream to the excuse. Clever.
And the second thing, probably the most important, the emperor was likely already sick.
Seriously ill.
Almost certainly. The records soon mention him falling ill, Bing, at Pingguan Ford. And in classical Chinese, Bing isn't a sniffle. It's serious.
So he's getting desperate. Sickness, maybe fear, makes him grasp at straws.
Exactly. Weakened, maybe scared, this wild story from the Fangxi suddenly sounds like his last, best hope. So he agrees.
So they arm the ships, get the archers ready, they sail past Zifu, spot a big fish.
Bang. Emperor takes it down.
The big question then, did it work? Did killing the fish finally unlock the path to immortality?
Nope, not a bit. The elixir remains stubbornly out of reach. The magic fish theory, busted.
And soon after, the emperor's own health really fails. By the time the whole procession gets to Pingguan Ford, still in modern Shandong, he collapses.
Yeah. The grand tour grinds to a halt. The quest is over.
And his choice of treatment then is incredibly revealing, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He doesn't call for more alchemists or weird rituals. He does something very specific.
He sends Meng Yi, his super trusted minister brother of the famous general Meng Tian, racing back to the capital, Xianyang.
And what's Meng Yi's urgent mission?
To pray. To conduct huge sacrifices to the mountain and river gods of the Qin homeland.
This one action tells us so much. Two critical things, really.
Okay, what's the first?
Meng Yi. Loyal, powerful, incorruptible Meng Yi. He's now gone. sent away from the emperor's side at the most critical moment possible.
Which leaves the door wide open.
Li Si, the chancellor, and Zhao Gao, that scheming eunuch. With Meng Yi gone, there's nobody powerful enough left in the immediate circle to stop them when they decide to forge the emperor's will after his death.
Sealing the fate of the rightful heir, Fu Su, and the whole Meng family. Wow. Calculated.
Ruthlessly so. But the second thing it reveals is about the emperor himself, his true beliefs.
After all those tours, all those sacrifices to gods all over the empire.
Mount Tai, the Eastern Sea, Yu the Great, all that political theater declaring his universal rule when his own life is on the line.
He goes back to his roots.
Exactly. He puts his faith not in the gods of the lands he conquered, but in the ancestral gods of Qin. In his final moments, that's where his true belief lay. Everything else, performance.
Which leads to the final massive problem. He's dying. Everyone knows it, but nobody can say it.
Right. He refused to hear the word death. Literally taboo.
And because of that taboo, this colossal issue is just hanging there. He still hasn't named a crown prince.
All those years. He has something like 20 sons, but no official heir.
So if the emperor dies, the mountains and tombs collapse, as they put it. Who takes over?
It's the million-dollar question, succession. The thing most likely to throw the empire straight back into chaos. But nobody dares bring it up with him.
So it just festers, a time bomb waiting for his last breath.
It explodes pretty spectacularly soon after.
So ends the man, but not the idea, not the system he built. And maybe to really get a handle on his impact, thinking of him as that founder CEO helps.
I think it does. China, Inc. His achievements, viewed that way, are just off the charts. He stops 2 centuries of horrific warfare, a total free-for-all.
Okay, major accomplishment.
Then he standardizes everything, like a tech giant forcing interoperability. Currency, writing, weights, measures, even the width of roads, creating a unified platform.
Infrastructure for the empire.
Exactly. Then there's the corporate rebranding using the 5 virtues theory, earth, wood, metal, fire, water, giving his dynasty cosmic legitimacy.
Claiming his place in the natural order.
And he flattens the org chart, demolishes the old state walls, metaphorically and literally. All power flowed directly to him, the central processor. It's genius in a ruthless, systematic way.
And it's a massive, but the cost, the human cost of this success.
Immense. Unfathomable, really. Think about the Great Wall, the canals, Apang Palace, which was never even finished, his unbelievable tomb with a terracotta army.
All built by millions of people, conscripts, convicts.
Treated as utterly disposable, just resources to be used up and thrown away for the glory of the state and the CEO.
It's incredibly dark.
And then there's the man himself, his psychology. The record suggests this deep, bottomless insecurity.
The micromanager who weighed his paperwork every day.
That's the guy. Paranoid. Trusting no one. Building that insane network of tunnels and covered walkways between hundreds of palaces just so no one knew where he was.
Hiding from assassins, hiding from evil spirits, becoming invisible.
It's not just policy at that point, is it? It feels like pathology. Probably born from that traumatic childhood as a hostage in another state. Absolute power coupled with absolute fear.
And that's where his story really speaks to us now, I think. It's this timeless warning about balancing unity and diversity, security and freedom.
Absolutely. His drive for ideological conformity, everyone must think the same way, for the state to be secure, led straight to burning books and burying scholars alive.
An extreme version of temptations we still see today, right? Debates about censorship, controlling the narrative. How much difference can a state tolerate?
Exactly. And those massive projects, unifying the state, yes, but crushing the people in the process. It forces us to ask that question we still wrestle with. What's the acceptable human cost for progress, for security?
Think about big infrastructure projects today or mass surveillance debates. Where is that line?
It's the Qin Shi Huang dilemma, echoing down through centuries.
So in the end, the ultimate irony is just staggering. Everything he personally cared about most, he failed.
Utterly. The Immortality Elixir. Died on the road, probably sick and terrified. The dynasty meant to last 10,000 generations. Gone in 3 years. His own son, Hu Hai, overthrown.
But the thing he maybe didn't fully grasp the long-term significance of?
The system itself. The centralized bureaucratic empire forged in, yes, fire and blood. That became the blueprint, the default mode for China for 2,000 years.
So his true legacy wasn't the dynasty, but the state structure.
I think so. He teaches us maybe that you can build an empire out of stone and laws and sheer force of will. But if you don't build it on the trust, the goodwill, the dare I say, humanity of the people within it.
You're just building a magnificent tomb for your own ambition.
Well put. A powerful, cautionary tale.
Definitely a figure worth spending more time with. His decisions, his psychology, they cast such a long shadow, even today. We really encourage you to keep exploring Qin Shi Huang and the world he made.
If you found this discussion useful, maybe learned something new, definitely hit that subscribe button. We do these deep dives regularly, exploring valuable ideas.
We appreciate you tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.